On October 25, 1994, the quiet town of Union, South Carolina, was shaken to its core. Susan Smith, a mother of two, burst into the police station, frantic and tearful. She claimed a stranger had carjacked her with her two young sons, Michael and Alex, still in the car. For 9 days, a nation held its breath, united in the hope that these innocent children would be found safe. But in the end, this wasn't a story of a kidnapper or a daring rescue. It was something far darker. Before the tragic incident of 1994, Susan Smith's life was marked by hardship and emotional struggles. Raised in Union, South Carolina, Susan faced early trauma with her parents' divorce and her father's passing when she was 6. Growing up, she struggled with depression and often felt isolated. By her late teens, she married David Smith, and they had 2 sons, Michael and Alex. However, their marriage was rocky, marked by financial troubles and infidelity. Susan also had a relationship with a coworker, Tom Findley, the son of her boss, but he eventually broke things off, citing his reluctance to be involved with someone who had young children. Susan was reportedly devastated by this, feeling rejected and overwhelmed by her circumstances. Susan had several fantasies about sex with Tom and felt things would have worked out for both of them if not for her circumstances of having had 2 children. Friends described Susan as deeply insecure and in need of approval, often burdened by the weight of her difficult past. As pressures mounted, Susan's emotional state continued to unravel, setting the stage for the devastating events that would later capture the nation's attention. Susan Smith's 2 children were missing. At the heart of this tragedy was a mother who wept before the cameras, pleading with the kidnapper to let her boys come home. Susan Smith told investigators that a black man had forced her out of her car at gunpoint, speeding away with her 3-year-old son, Michael, and her 14-month-old son, Alex, still strapped in their car seats. Susan's story gripped the nation. This was a small-town tragedy, but everyone, mothers, fathers, grandparents, all felt her pain. They wanted those boys to come home. Police scoured the area, roadblocks were set up, and helicopters flew overhead. Volunteers searched tirelessly. For 9 days, Union, South Carolina, and the entire country hoped, prayed, and waited for a miracle. But for the investigators working the case, something about Susan's story didn't add up. There were inconsistencies from the start. Susan's description of the alleged kidnapper was vague, almost as if she were pulling details from thin air. And her behavior, she'd cry one moment, then seem composed the next. As the days went on, they began to question her version of events. As detectives pressed her for details, Susan's story began to waver. They noticed strange gaps in her recollection, moments where her emotions seemed oddly restrained. Behind the scenes, investigators started considering the unthinkable, that Susan herself might be hiding something. Her responses hinted at deeper issues, possibly even guilt. But in cases like this, investigators are often resistant to believe a mother could harm her own children. On the evening of November 3rd, after hours of questioning and a growing weight of guilt pressing on her, Susan Smith broke. She finally confessed to the unthinkable. Susan admitted that on the night of October 25th, she had driven her car, with her sons inside, to John D. Long Lake. She put the car in neutral, released the brake, and watched as it slowly rolled into the water. Michael and Alex were strapped in their car seats, trapped as the car sank beneath the lake's surface. That moment was unforgettable. She was calm, almost numb, as she described it. Investigators sat there, stunned, listening to her describe letting her children drown. When rescuers finally pulled the car from the lake, the grim reality was undeniable. The boys had died alone, underwater, with no one to save them. But why would a mother commit such a horrifying act? Investigators soon discovered what they believed to be Susan's motive. She had recently ended an affair and was desperate to win back her lover, a wealthy man who, by all accounts, didn't want children. In Susan's mind, her sons had become an obstacle to the life she desired. Susan's family member interviewed said, "Susan was struggling, but we never thought it would come to this. She seemed like a devoted mother, even if she had her troubles. This was beyond anyone's comprehension." As details of the case emerged, the public's sympathy turned to rage. Susan Smith's name became synonymous with betrayal and heartless cruelty. People from all over the country traveled to Union to protest, demanding justice for Michael and Alex. Susan Smith faced trial, her tearful demeanor replaced by a stoic expression as she heard the charges against her. Her defense team argued that she suffered from severe depression, driven by a lifetime of abuse and emotional scars. But to the jury, nothing could justify the horror she had inflicted. In July 1995, Susan Smith was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Susan Smith remains in prison, a mother who, for reasons no one will ever fully understand, chose to take away the two precious lives she had created. And though time has passed, her story, and the memory of her sons, remain etched in the minds of those who will never forget.